Alex Jones decided to go nuclear on David Pakman. Now, this is fascinating because David Pakman has done like a million segments going after Alex Jones, as I have. Specific comments that he made, you take the video clip, you put it up, you respond to it, you rip it to shreds. He's had to do that at least 20 times. I've done that at least 30 or 40 times because he's a gold mine. There's so much material that he gives you. But funny enough, I don't know how this got on his radar or whatever, but Alex goes after David for something that seems so banal here, and he goes so over the top with his attack. Let's take a look.
We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2DavidP. Here's a voicemail I received with a very practical question about if it came time to leave the country, would you still be able to leave the country? It's a very good question.
Hi, David. I just heard you say on the stream that if the United States becomes a full-blown dictatorship by 2024, you will be leaving the country. So I've been thinking about this a lot myself. And is it too late? If you wait until it's a full-blown dictatorship, will you even be able to leave the country? If you're that concerned about it happening, should you be making plans to leave before it goes full-blown dictatorship?
Yeah, this is a fair question, which is like...
All right, pause. Back it up 5 seconds. I'm not going to edit this. I want you to hear it in its congruency. They admit, and I played the clips from the Davos group, the UN, all of it, that it's a world ID where you won't be able to travel or leave your house, quote, 1/2 foot if you don't have the vaccine passport. And I have a whole stack of articles I'll show you about that. And they're saying that Republicans are the ones that passed the law to put kill switches in all the cars, which is now law. And I mean, the Republicans are horrible, weak, pathetic, cowardly folks on average. I don't like them, but they're not the people in the driver's seat like the Democrats. And imagine, though, this fear porn, though the Trump supporters are going to have a dictatorship. Are you kidding? George Soros has got almost every district attorney and attorney general under his control. And you sit there and act like you're not the establishment. That is a lie on its face. Continue with this garbage.
This is a fair question, which is like, if things completely changed overnight in the U.S. and all of a sudden no one was allowed to leave, the plan of saying, I will stay if and until it gets really bad doesn't work, because if it got so bad, you wouldn't be allowed to leave. I don't, you know, when we talk about the Canadian political scientists who said the U.S. could be a
back it up 5 seconds. No, exactly. No. Let's say you've got the media. You've got the universities, you've got the military, you've got the banks, you've got Hollywood, and you're like, hey, don't worry, you don't need to leave. We're raping America really good. We got drag queen story time going on, okay? We got devaluation of the dollar. We got Cloward Pivot. We're gutting this bitch.
U.S. could be a dictatorship by 2030 or whatever else the case may be. I believe that it would be a continued slow slide in that direction. And I am counting on the
more projection. That's what they're doing to us.
That I would have time to get out if such a time came. Now, would I, if it's so slow that the frog doesn't realize it's getting burned, right?
Total projection.
Would I know when it's time to leave? These are all fair questions, but I don't think it would be like an overnight, no more flights out.
So they're doing this to us. Classical corporate takeover, censorship, debanking, arrest, tyranny, collapsing. And then he's talking about them as victims. Talk about a fantasy. Talk about a simulation. He's in his own, but he knows it's not a simulation. He loves this for his little groveling followers that actually drink this Kool-Aid. Let's continue.
But maybe some people in the audience have a different perspective.
If I was telling my children who not to be, it's that guy. I mean, he's a disgrace. And I don't say that like, God, I feel good about myself. No, he makes me feel pathetic. Look at those eyes, man. That dude is gone, ladies and gentlemen. Thank your lucky stars every day you're not Dave Pakman. Look at that. That is a frickin' predator right there, who thinks he's smarter than you, thinks he's better than you, and he's going to beat you, he thinks. No, Joe Rogan and Bill Maher, they're all smarter than you, big man. Because, you know, they've played both sides, but now they know who's going to win. You're on the wrong side of history. And I'm so sorry for what's going to happen to you by your own decisions. But he's an archetype, a sample out of the fetid latrine or cesspool that is the system. You think the people that have the underground bases call up people like Pakman? No. Pakman never talked to the New World Order. Pakman never tried to get hired by the Kissinger Group because Pakman's a loser. He's a sellout. He's not a real man. He's not a knight at the round table. He didn't actually have a real discussion with the power structure he worships. See, I said no to the evil power structure. Not because I was a hero, but because I had God. I had a connection to the infinite. I knew this was a failure. This was not good. I didn't join with God in justice because I was a good person. I did it because I had discernment and wanted to be with God. Mr. Pakman is not with God.
That got weirdly religious at the end there. It got weirdly religious. Alex Jones is with God, and Pakman, as he calls him, is not with God. Look, maybe I'm reading between the lines. Maybe I'm judging a little too harshly, but does that sound like a little bit of sprinkle of anti-Semitism right there at the end? Because we've heard him do it before. We've heard Alex Jones do it before, talking about Brian Stelter, who I also despise, by the way, but doing the old blood libel thing with Brian Stelter. And he brings up the eyes thing. Like, you sprinkling in a touch of anti-Semitism there, dog? What are you doing? What are you doing? And what does that even mean? I'm with God and you're not with God. How are you with God? That sounds more like paranoid schizophrenia to me. If you think you literally hear the voice of a magical sky wizard and you want people to take you seriously as if you're spitting facts on the air? Give me a break. So let's go through some of the stuff he said there. I love that. So he's melting down because David Pakman says, he's asked a question by an audience member like, hey, what do you do? Do you have plans to leave if the U.S. becomes a dictatorship? And how does that work? And David Pakman's like, hey, listen, I don't know. We might be the frog in boiling water, and by the time we know it's a dictatorship, it might be too late to leave, and then I'm screwed. So maybe I leave, maybe I won't, but I'm banking on having enough time if we start going down that path, so on and so forth. And Alex Jones flips out over that. But Alex Jones' whole shtick is that we're either currently living in a dictatorship or we will eventually live in a dictatorship. So this is, in a weird roundabout way, even though the details are totally different, this is David Pakman agreeing with your general sentiment. You think a terrible dictatorship is coming, and David Pakman thinks, hey, maybe it's coming, and if so, maybe I should have plans to leave the country. Why would you flip out over something that you nominally agree with? Well, we know the answer. The answer is because the implication from David Pakman is if a dictatorship comes, it's going to be ushered in under a Republican administration, and Alex Jones is pro-Republican, so he's triggered by that. Which is kind of hilarious because Alex Jones, every time he's people call him out and call him a right-winger, what does he say? He always does the thing where, look, under the Bush administration, I went after Bush nonstop. I'm not a Republican. I was the one who was opposed to the Iraq War. I was the one who was opposed to the Patriot Act and the torture and all that stuff under the Bush administration. So you can't accuse me of being partisan. Yeah, but that was back then. And since then, you had gone all in for Donald Trump, who, by the way, continued the torture and continued the wars and continued a lot of the Bush policies. In many ways, he was just an extension of the George W. Bush presidency, but you were cucked by him for a long time. Now, recently he turned on him, but the reason he turned on him was the dumbest reason of all. It's because Trump said some pro-vaccine shit, and Alex Jones thinks that that's part of the, Illuminati globalist Bilderberg conspiracy or whatever. But look, again, if you're not partisan, Alex, like you say you're not, well, then why would you get mad when David Pakman is just casually discussing, well, what if we become a dictatorship and it's ushered in under Republicans? If anything, you should be like, right, I hate the Democrats and the Republicans, so maybe it will come in under the Republicans. So I kind of agree. And by the way, the idea that it's crazy to have that conversation. I mean, first of all, we already live in a kleptocracy and an oligarchy. That's the open conspiracy that Alex Jones doesn't talk about. He raises the conspiracy one more level. But the real conspiracy is out in the open. Corporations run the government. Billionaires run the government. The donor class runs the government. So that's the open conspiracy, is campaign contributions and politicians not representing the will of the American people. Trump literally tried to steal the election. That's not conjecture. That's not my opinion. That's a fact. There's more and more stories that come out every day, too, about it. Now we know there was more than one memo drafted about seizing voting machines and trying to overturn the election and ushering in martial law. Trump just released a statement the other day attacking Mike Pence because Mike Pence didn't try to single-handedly overturn the election results. So why is it crazy to have this conversation? It's a reasonable conversation. Of course it's a reasonable conversation. There were over 60 court cases. Donald Trump lost every one except like one, and the one that he won was over some procedural nonsense that doesn't change the outcome. We had the Arizona election audit. And not only did Biden win, he won by more votes than everybody originally thought. So the conversation is not insane. Alex Jones is just triggered that Pakman thinks, hey, if we're going to get a dictatorship, it's going to come under Republicans. I love when Alex brings up drag queen story time. Like, what are you talking about? I'll tell you what it is. It's Alex Jones he just lumps everybody who's left of center by any stretch of the imagination into the you have to be insanely woke category. And so he drags in drag queen story time into the conversation. By the way, David Pakman is a critic of wokeness. You know, he's talked about that openly. So what are you doing? When he says Joe Rogan and Bill Maher are smarter than you, big man, why are you randomly giving credit to Joe Rogan and Bill Maher? By the way, those two guys definitely don't agree with Alex Jones on everything. In fact, they probably have way more disagreement than agreement. But again, it's just that Bill Maher recently did a new rule segment where he goes after the left and he attacks them for being crazy and too woke. And Joe Rogan has always been anti-woke. So in the mind of Alex Jones, it's like, if you are sufficiently anti-woke, then you're one of the good guys. What a low bar to be part of, like, this fight against the globalists and the Illuminati. Like, I think pink-haired college kids are stupid. Welcome to the club! It's just so dumb. It's so dumb. And then, of course, we get the best quotes of all when Alex Jones says, quote, "He makes me feel pathetic." Well, as David Pakman said in response to that, that might be something that you want to flesh out with a psychotherapist. You should be in some deep psychiatry or psychology sessions if that's what happens when you watch David Pakman. He makes you feel pathetic? He's not saying Pakman is pathetic. He's saying Pakman makes me feel pathetic. Okay. And then, quote, "Look at those eyes. That dude is gone." He calls him a loser. He calls him a predator. And the idea, when Alex Jones accuses somebody else of being a sellout, it's hilarious because Alex Jones literally begged for money from big donors when he lost his Sandy Hook cases. So, we needed to stay afloat. We went through his finances on the show recently. There was a big article about that, and we broke it down for you. Homeboy is straight up swimming in a pool of cash. Alex Jones is. And most of the stuff, you know, he makes money through his InfoWars store where he's got, you know, the t-shirts or whatever, the merch. I don't know if it's mugs or he's got clothing stuff that says, "Let's go Brandon on her" or whatever. But then he also has total scam supplements that are proven scams. And so if anything, if Alex Jones is going to go down for anything, it's not even the Sandy Hook thing in the long run. It would be just fraud scam supplements that he's selling. So we'll see if that happens. But what this tells me is Alex Jones is liable any day to find a video of me talking about something innocuous and come after me. But what he probably won't do is take a specific segment where I'm going after him for something and then respond to that. Because, again, Pakman did about 1,000 segments going after Alex Jones more generally on specific things he said. Somehow that was off Alex Jones' radar, or he saw it but didn't respond. This is the thing that he chooses to flip out over. I mean, honestly, kind of hilarious. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.